Hello and welcome to Camping with the Coles. Today we have a gear review for you. We have a lithium iron phosphate battery from a company called Vatrer. This battery is 300 amp hours and can even handle those outdoor adventures that go below freezing for an extended period of time. I'd like to thank Vatrer for giving us this battery to try out. As always, this is my honest opinion of this piece of gear. When you buy a new travel trailer, they usually come with a 100 amp hour lead acid battery. Actually, ours came with an 85 amp hour lead acid battery. If you're camping without hookups, that lead acid battery will barely last a full day for you. If you have a 12-volt fridge, like most new trailers come with, it probably will last you about half a day. Lithium iron phosphate batteries are the way to go nowadays. Over the last few years, the price of them has come way down. If you plan to do some boondocking or off-grid camping or any kind of camping without hookups, you should be looking into lithium iron phosphate batteries. They're less than half the weight of a lead acid battery, and they have twice the usable amp hours. To keep a lead acid battery in good shape and to make it last as long as possible, which is 3 to 5 years, you shouldn't discharge it to under 50%. A lithium iron phosphate battery is good to 10 plus years, and you can deplete it down to 0%. So it has twice the usable amp hours of a lead acid battery. Now let's take a look at the unboxing of this 300 amp hour Vatrer battery.
Jeez.
Over the past couple of years, I used another brand of lithium iron phosphate battery, but for some reason, they're not available in Canada anymore. So I wanted to try out a new brand of lithium iron phosphate battery so that I can give a recommendation for our Canadian viewers of a battery that they can purchase here in Canada and is shipped from Canada. I did a lot of research to determine what would best suit our needs. Number one, I wanted it to be of good build quality and good parts. Number two, I wanted it to come with a Bluetooth app so that I can monitor what the battery is doing in real time. And number three, I wanted it to be at a good price. As part of my research, like a lot of you, I went to YouTube and I watched a couple videos from DIY Solar with Will Prowse. And by the way, Will just reached 1 million subscribers, so congratulations, Will. Will is an expert in batteries and solar power. What he does is he looks at all the technical aspects of the batteries, what the company claims they can do, and he tests it against the claims. So he does a lot of technical testing, and then he rips the battery apart and has a look inside to see what it's made of and to check out its parts. So that is very different from what we do because I am not an expert in batteries. I can just tell you about the real world applications of the battery. But I use Will's advice in getting the Vatrer battery because he did a review of budget-friendly batteries and he reviewed the 100 amp hour Vatrer battery. It met every standard that it claims, and when he got the saw out and took it apart, he was very impressed with the inner workings. He found that they used name brand parts that are often found in much more expensive batteries, and the build quality was excellent. So he was impressed with it and he recommended it. So if Will is impressed with it, then I'm impressed with it and I want to try it out and I want to show it in real world situations. Let's have a look at how the battery is working out on this trip. On this trip, we're going to be camping without hookups. We're going to be testing out our new Vatrer battery. So it is Wednesday right now. We're going to be leaving on Saturday. Currently, our battery is at 100%. It's actually at 298.8 amp hours of a total of 300 amp hours. We do not have an inverter, so we don't have any use of our AC outlets, anything like that. So things like the jack, the power jack, is going to be used in the battery. The slide out when we put it out. It'll also be the water heater and fridge. They're both on propane, but they still use some of the battery power because they have thermostats in them and it has to create the spark for the propane to ignite. It runs all the lights and the carbon monoxide detector, that sort of thing. So the battery's going to be running that. We're going to keep a tab on how the battery's doing over the next 3 days. Looks like it's using about 27 watts with the power tongue jack. That's without any resistance. Let's see if it changes when you have some resistance. And now we're going to start getting some resistance. 31 watts, 36, 43, 45, 48, 55, 63, and 4.7 amps, 70 and 5.2 amps, 5.6 amps. So it's using a lot of power to do this. 109 watts, 8.3 amps. 219.8 watts, 15.6 amps, 17 amps. 166 watts, 12.4 amps. Yeah, so that's how much power is being used for the slide out. It uses a fair bit. 214.4 watts, 230 watts, 265, 257, and around 20 amps. And that's it. So that's the main power for setting up the site. We are still at 99%, and that was the main power to be used. Obviously, we're going to have to do that at the very end too, but as you can see, it didn't really affect the battery much at all. It's Thursday, about 4:20 p.m., and I'm checking out my Vatrer battery. We are at 85%, so it used up 15% of the battery in the last 24 hours. It's at 254.7 amp hours, which means it used up approximately 44 amp hours for the last 24 hours. And that included setup with the power jack, the slide out, and the awning. Cheryl likes to leave the radio on all the time, so the radio's been going on for a lot of that time, except for when we were sleeping. We had the furnace on last night because it was cold. I'll get back to you tomorrow and we'll see where we're at after 48 hours. So it's been about 48 hours since we've been here. We are at 73% right now at 217.5 amp hours. So that is about 81 amp hours that we've used up in 48 hours. And with nothing really going on in the trailer, we're using about 14.6 watts. That seemed to be pretty typical. That's just running the basic things in the trailer. No lights, nothing really going on. Just the ghost power going out. We'll check in tomorrow when we're packing up. Okay, this is it. We are all packed up. We just brought in the power awning, the power slide, and the power jack. They all use up a fair bit of power. And we are at 59% on the Vatrer battery. It says that we've used up we're left with 178.5 amp hours, which means we used about 120 amp hours on this trip. I will say that is more than we usually use. I think usually we'd be more around 90 to 100 amp hours on a trip like this. But it's been cold on this trip, and we've used the furnace a lot. And the furnace uses around 80 to 90 watts. So that is a fair bit of power usage, and it is definitely by far our highest power usage. Without the furnace, I think we'd be probably about 30 amp hours less than what we are right now. But these things happen, and it doesn't matter. We're at 59%, and it's been about 68 hours. It's not a full 3 days, not a full 72 hours, but it goes to show that we could easily do another 3-4 days. And if it was closer to summertime and no furnace, we could do 7, 8, 9 days even on this battery. So that is awesome. Big fan of this battery. It's doing a great job for us. And that is it for this trip. Now, whether you want a battery with a self-heating element is up to you and the type of camping you do. Without the self-heating element, the battery works from 60 degrees Celsius to minus 20 degrees Celsius. If it gets hotter than the working temperature or colder than the working temperature, the BMS kicks in and just shuts the battery down, so there will be no damage. And the battery will automatically restart once the temperature gets within range. Now, it will work below 0 degrees Celsius, but if you want to charge it below that temperature, then you need a self-heating element, because it won't charge below 0 degrees Celsius. The self-heating element will allow it to charge down to minus 20 Celsius. The heating element will automatically turn on when it gets to 0 degrees Celsius, and it'll turn off when it gets back up to 5 degrees Celsius. That way you can still charge the batteries when it's below freezing. Now, the alternative to that is to install the batteries in the living area of the trailer. These batteries don't give off any gas like a lead acid battery does, so they can be installed in the living area. What a lot of people do is they install them under the dinette or under the bed, and they can be installed in any position. They can be installed sideways, upside down, whatever fits the space that you're putting them into. Now, something that I really love and I think is so important is the ability to see what is happening in real time with your battery. Now, that can be done inside your trailer with a button that shows you what's happening with the battery. Ours is an older trailer, and it is just 4 dots to show you what level your battery is at, and it is not effective when you switch to a lithium iron phosphate battery. Some of you might have a newer trailer that comes pre-wired with solar, and you might have a better system to show you what's happening with your battery. The other thing you can do is install a shunt, but that includes some wiring, and you can monitor your battery that way. The easiest way is what Vatrer does, and that is with Bluetooth and a free app that you can get from the Play Store or the App Store, and it shows you everything you need to know. On the dial here, it shows the state of charge visually and in a percentage. It shows you the remaining capacity of the battery from the full 300 amp hours. It shows the total volts, the current, which is positive if charging and negative if discharging. Same thing with the power, which is watts in and out. It shows the high voltage, low voltage, and the difference and average. It also shows how many times the battery has been cycled, meaning charged. Under temperature, it shows the temperature of the battery. At the very bottom, it shows the 4 cells that make up this battery. It shows the voltage in each cell. As the battery discharges, each cell may vary, but when you fully charge it, they should equal out. For that reason, in your trailer, you want to make sure you have a converter that can charge lithium iron phosphate batteries. I have a video on swapping out the converter, and I'll put that link in the description below. If your converter is only designed to charge lead-acid batteries, then it'll only charge the lithium iron phosphate batteries to about 80 or 90%. But you need to charge it to 100% so it can balance out those 4 cells. If the battery never gets to 100%, the cells can deplete differently, and that'll reduce the life of your battery. So if you don't want to install a new converter, then every now and then you should be charging up the batteries to 100% with an external battery charger. We have one, and what we use it for is at the end of the winter season when we're about to reinstall the battery, I charge it up fully with that. So when I put it in the trailer, it's already fully charged. I'll put a link to that in the description below also. In my experience with lithium iron phosphate batteries, I found that we only use 30 to 35 amp hours per day. On this particular trip, we're using around 44 or 45 amp hours per day because it is cold at night and we're putting on the furnace. And from looking at the app, it shows that we're using about 100 watts when the furnace is on. And that's a total of 100 watts. The general wattage being used when the trailer appears to be turned off of everything is 12 to 15 watts. That's just phantom power that's being used. Now keep in mind, we don't have an inverter installed, so the battery is only charging the DC or 12 volt devices. Those devices include the power tongue jack, the power awning, the power slide, all the lights, the fridge, and the water heater when both of them are in propane mode, so they're using as little electricity as possible, but they still do use battery power in order to run the thermostats on them and to create the spark to ignite the propane. It also runs the water pump and the carbon monoxide detector. Now we're not using the water pump on this one because we're plugged into water, but the water pump comes on for such a small amount of time that it really doesn't make much of a difference. Our TV runs on 120 volt or AC power, so it's not plugged in, we're not using that. Now in our old trailer, the TV could plug directly into a DC outlet. The only way we can do that here is I have a small inverter that plugs into the DC outlet, so I can plug a 120 volt or AC cord into that. But we're not doing that on this trip. I also have a video from a couple of years ago on how to install a DC outlet in your trailer. You might want to check that out. In almost all new trailers sold in the last few years, they come with a 12 volt fridge. Well, that 12 volt fridge uses a lot more power than if you have an electric propane fridge. I saw a YouTube video where a guy had the 12 volt fridge, and when he was camping without hookups, he was using about 91 amp hours per day. Compare that to our 30 to 35 amp hours, it uses a lot of power. For that reason, I am not a big fan of the 12 volt fridges if you plan on camping without power. If you're always going to be hooked up to power, no problem. There's a lot of benefits to a 12 volt fridge. But if you plan on doing off-grid camping, then the 12 volt is not the way to go. However, if you do have that, then you need a lot of battery power, and that's where this 300 amp hour battery really comes into play. So with that 100 amp hour lead acid battery that comes with your trailer, if you have a 12 volt fridge, you're probably going to get about half a day of power from your battery. If you have a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, you'll probably get a full day. So it's using close to 100 amp hours a day. With this 300 amp hour battery, that means you could get about 3 days out of it if you're using a 12 volt fridge. I should mention that you can hook up 4 of these batteries in a row, so if you need a lot more battery power, you can do it. Now let's do a little comparison between lead acid and lithium iron phosphate batteries. A 100 amp hour lead acid battery versus a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. 60 pounds compared to 24 pounds. 50 amp hours of usable power compared to 100 amp hours of usable power. 300 to 500 cycles compared to 5,000 plus cycles. A 3 to 5 year lifespan compared to a 10 plus year lifespan. Requires regular maintenance compared to no maintenance required. Price $200 compared to price of $400. Now, like we talked about before, it takes 2 100 amp hour lead acid batteries to equal 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate batteries, because the lead acid batteries can only be brought down to 50% to keep their lifespan good, which is 3 to 5 years. And let's say you do get 5 years out of it. At 5 years, you have to buy another battery or another 2 batteries to equal that lithium iron phosphate battery. So in the long run, that means it takes 4 lead acid batteries to equal 1 lithium iron phosphate battery of the same size. So that's $800 for lead acid and $400 for lithium iron phosphate. Now let's talk about weight, which is a big deal for me. 2 lead acid batteries weigh around 120 pounds, where 1 lithium iron phosphate battery is about 24 pounds. That's a big difference, and that's a big reason to make the switch right now. So this 300 amp hour battery weighs 58 pounds, and it's comparable in usable power to 6 lead acid batteries, which would be 360 pounds. Now, I don't know anybody that would want 360 pounds of battery on their tongue when they could just have 58 pounds. The current cost of a 100 amp hour Vatrer battery is $273 US or $399 Canadian. The current cost of a 300 amp hour Vatrer battery is $589 US or $819 Canadian. If you want it with the self-heating element, the current cost is $635 US or $929 Canadian. And it is free shipping across the US and Canada. I'll put the links in the description below so you can check out the current prices. And like I've said, the cost of these batteries keeps getting lower. So check out that link, because by the time you're watching this, the price might even be lower. I've been using this battery for a few months now and have had no issues. It works as described. This is a good battery at a good price. That's it for this gear review. We'll see you in the next one.